Hello, and welcome to today's webcast entitled Modernizing Business Systems. What do you need to know? I'm Sean McSpaden. I serve as a senior fellow with the Center for Digital Government. I'm very excited to be your host for today's webcast. I want to thank you all for joining us. I think we're going to have a great session over the next hour or so. Before we dive into the content, though, I wanted to share some brief housekeeping notes that we've got for you. We've designed this webcast to be interactive, and you can participate in Q&A with us by submitting your questions using the Q&A widget. Please send in your questions as they come up throughout the presentation. We'll address them, as many of them as possible, during the Q&A portion near the end of the webinar. You can also increase or decrease the size of your media player and or your slides windows. So certainly you can test that out over the first couple of minutes that we're together. We will email a recording of this presentation to all registrants within 48 hours of the close of the webinar. Please use this recording for your reference or feel free to pass it along to a colleague using the share widget in the console menu. Also, at the close of the webcast, we would encourage you to complete a brief survey about the presentation. We'd like to hear what you think. We always are looking for ways that we can improve. If you are unable to stay with us the entire webcast, but would like to complete the survey, simply click the survey widget at the bottom of the screen to launch the survey. Otherwise, it will automatically pop up as soon as the webcast concludes. Currently, we do recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers. And if you're experiencing any media player issues or have any other technical problems, please visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the help button at the bottom of the console. I'd like to get us started with today's webinar, just with a few opening remarks. So certainly, as you all, I'm sure, are aware, agencies at the state and local government level, we're all working hard to modernize our business systems. Many of us are faced with having to use systems that are 10, 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years old. In the areas of financial management, budgeting, HR, customer relationship management, which is a new phenomenon for most of us, and also moving into business analytics solutions. But it's important to know before you, to say know before you go. We've got to know what we're getting into. We certainly need to investigate the kinds of things that we need to look for in a new business solution. Certainly all of us will have our own unique and sometimes common concerns and risks. What questions should we be asking of a potential provider or solution vendor? Over the next 60 minutes, we'll look at some exclusive new data from a recent survey that the Center for Digital Government and Euna Solutions conducted together on an often overlooked aspect of GovTech, business systems modernization. Together, we'll explore those survey results, and we'll have an opportunity to learn how states, cities, and counties are modernizing these business systems and the number one thing that they worry about. We'll learn and explore the top strategies that all of us should consider as we start our own transformation journey. We'll talk a bit about why a modular approach can support existing single platform enterprise resource planning systems like those that have multiple finance, procurement, HR, materials management modules to enable greater flexibility and ease of use. And finally, we'll talk a bit about how to make sure these new systems stay secure over time. Cybersecurity, regardless of jurisdiction, of course, is a top priority. I'm just very pleased to be one of your speakers and your moderator today. We'll have a pretty active conversation. So I'm going to provide a little bit more background on me, and then I'll have the great opportunity to introduce my partner for today's session. As I mentioned, I'm a senior fellow with the Center for Digital Government, but I also work in Oregon state government and have for the last 25 years or so. The first 15 years in my background, I served in the executive branch. The last 5.5 of those years served as Oregon's Deputy State Chief Information Officer. And for the past 10 years, I've worked for the legislative branch in Oregon government as the committee administrator for Oregon's Joint Legislative Committee on Information Management and Technology. Throughout that period of time, I've had oversight responsibility for probably hundreds of major IT projects, including several enterprise resource planning, or what we call administrative information systems modernization efforts related to finance, budget, grants management, procurement, and human resources. So that's enough about me. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Abhi Namani, who serves as the Senior Vice President of Product Strategy at Euna Solutions. Abhi, you want to introduce yourself and then provide us an overview of Euna?
Thanks, Sean. Thank you so much for being here, for taking the time. I want to first start by thanking the Center for Digital Government for conducting this survey, doing this research, and inviting us all here to discuss it. And Sean, thank you again for taking the time to talk about it today. As you know, my name is Abhi Namani. I've been in government technology for not as long as Sean, but have been very active and passionate about it my whole career. I helped start an organization called Code for America that worked with cities across the country around 2010 to 15, helping build kind of digital services strategy and digital strategy in general. I then spent some time in government myself. I was the chief data officer for the city of Los Angeles, working for Mayor Eric Garcetti, and I was the chief innovation officer for Sacramento, focusing there on economic development, so a different angle on the tech side. And then for the last handful of years, I've been consulting with philanthropy, private equity, and the private sector on how to build a stronger and more vibrant government technology ecosystem to support folks inside government, right? How are we making sure we're building the tools and being the partners we can be to make the public sector more effective? And that's why I recently joined Euna Solutions as the VP of Product Strategy. So as a quick piece of background on Euna Solutions, Euna is, what I like to say is we help government work better. And by work, I mean literally. As Sean was talking about business systems, we do kind of back office admin tools, ranging from budgeting, which includes things like strategic planning and priority-based budgeting, all the way to transparency and citizen engagement. It includes things like procurement, helping drive efficient use of citizens' dollars, while also driving equity and performance outcomes. Things like grants, which I know for state and local governments are essential, both as ways to find and disperse resources. And then finally, also some citizen-facing pieces, particularly payments and permits, making it easier for citizens to, do business with the government. So that's Euna's kind of general view as we build these systems that help governments work better. And we've been doing that actually for the last 20 years. Euna itself may be a new name to some of the folks on this call. It's actually a new name to me. It was called GTY Technologies beforehand. And it's actually a handful of different point solutions, individual solutions designed to solve purpose-built issues, designed for a single purpose, built with a single purpose to solve key problems within the public sector. And we've been doing that across 2,000 different communities, some from very small to very large. And to give you just a sense of the scale and kind of what we work on, in terms of citizens engagement, that number reaches over 100 million citizens. Over 40 million payments have been collected through the platform to date. We do $20 billion in procurements and over $100 billion in budgets under management, right? But again, for those of you guys on the call, for those of the states, you guys realize that could just be one of your agencies, right? And we realize that. And that's why we're always trying to learn and always trying to understand what's needed, right? I'm proud to be part of a company with this kind of legacy and this kind of breadth, but I'm also eager to know what we can do to be more effective and be more useful to governments of all stripes and across different jurisdictions. And in particular, and I'll end with this, Sean, so I'll stop talking, across different silos, right? And that's, I think, the context for today's conversation is, there's a joking phrase we use in tech that sometimes you ship the org chart. So oftentimes we look at these different pieces of technology, procurement, budgeting, grants, as different pieces, and they should be, right? They're different individual challenges, but we want to think holistically, right, as leaders about how we're solving our business needs, right? And that's when I think about the question of modernizing business systems. That's the question, right? How are we changing the way we do business, the tools we use to do business to meet the profound challenges we face today? So with that context, I'm super excited to be here and excited to jump in the conversation.
We know, Abhi, this is great. I've got this state government experience here in Oregon, and you've got a variety of experiences in both the public and private sector, certainly on the public side in local government. So I'm excited about the kind of conversation we can have today because, these kinds of back office systems, they're not the ones that people mention. They're not the ones that people really want to fund because, it's kind of like, the electricity in your home or the water in your home. You hate it when your power's out or your plumbing doesn't work, but you got to have it to be able to live in the home. And it's the same kind of thing with these back office, sometimes, that's a dirty word for folks, but certainly they're key to running a government operation. And without some level of integration, some level of data sharing, and certainly the ability to pull valuable information out of these systems and use it for making better decisions in the future, you're kind of dead in the water. Do you want to talk at all about the importance of these solutions at the local government level, or do you want to just have me kind of launch into the next portion of our conversation?
No. I mean, I will. Yeah, I think both at the state and local level. I guess would add a bit of context, and frankly, from a personal perspective of why I'm excited about doing, to your point, Sean, what may not be the most exciting pieces of GovTech. Actually, I think my niece, she asked me a couple of weeks ago, Avi, what's your new job? Or Uncle, what's on your new job? I mentioned it's building budget, grants, and procurement software for government. She's like, Avi, that's boring. To be fair, I don't think she knows what procurement is, but even without knowing what it is, it sounded boring. And honestly, I get it, man. But it's mission critical, right? And I think now more than ever, and I think to your question, Sean, what excites me and the challenge now, right, is really the environment is shifting. What I like to say is it's shifting from just doing technology for technology's sake, right? Exploring what's possible. Actually, I remember when I first started my career, the tagline I always used was like, we're showing what's possible with tech. I think it's too late for that now, right? The environment we're in now is different. It's not about, what can and what should we do. It's more what we have to do now. And these mission critical systems are vital, particularly for local government. And in particular, when I think you think about budget and grants, right? Local government, as you know, Sean, has taken advantage and been benefited greatly from state and federal grants over the last handful of years, in particular to help invest in things like technology. Now, those resources are not guaranteed in the long run. And as we know, some of those resources are drying up in the near term. Right? And this requires thoughtful, creative budgeting, right? But also thoughtful and creative grant making, thoughtful and creative grant finding, right? And that is where things like connecting the dots make sense, right? You need to be able to see, here's our budget, here's our shortfall. So then what do we need to do on the grant making side to solve those problems? That's a very high level picture, right? But that I hope illustrates that the need to start connecting these dots if we're going to make better decisions using the data we have. And then you can extend that one step further, right? When you think about procurement, local government spends billions and billions and billions of dollars on things, not just technology, right? On pencils, on trucks, which that's how I get my niece to care about it more, is that side of the shop, like park benches and things like that too. But that's a huge other piece of the pie, right? Which again, under the constraints government's under now, it's going to be very important. As you, I'm sure, are seeing yourself, Sean, that state and local governments have unprecedented vacancy rates, right? Like I think it's 6% now for the state and local government across the board. That's compared to a 2% historical. So it's 3x over the last 5 years, and it's staying constant at that 6%. That's profound, right? I'm sorry to get very numerical there, but again, we're data nerds, so we can get there. But that's a big jump. And frankly, I would say that number is actually even higher in these back office departments that people don't see as vividly. I'm curious if you see that as well.
Well, I do, and so I'll just respond to that quickly, and then we'll move into the survey. But for Oregon state government, we just recently had a legislative session, and representatives of our primary public unions came forward and indicated out of a 40,000 person executive branch staff level, they estimate somewhere between 7,500 and 10,000 vacant positions, and so that percentage is very high depending on the state you're living in and working in. So you're absolutely right. And these kinds of systems are critical for transparency, for management, and for ensuring the efficient and effective service delivery of government. So let's
go ahead.
In the interest of time, Abhi, I'm gonna go ahead and move into our survey, and then we can have this conversation, as we move forward. So let me talk a bit about the shared work that Euna Solutions and the Center for Digital Government was able to conduct over the last couple of months. Business systems modernization survey was conducted. Some interviews were also conducted with the interviews with 15 participants and about 157 respondents for a national survey conducted of state and local government leaders across the country. We had a variety of questions that were posed. Here, with a limited time that we have, we're going to focus just on a couple of the key areas of that particular survey, to drive home the point of the importance of these systems, the kinds of challenges that state and local governments are facing, and what we can do about it together. So let's kind of dive right in. Wanted to again ground us all in the definition that was used of business systems modernization in the survey. Abhi and I have been mentioning kind of these buzzwords. Certainly, we were focused on financial management systems, enterprise resource planning solutions, and certainly resident-facing digital services such as permitting and licensing systems, payment systems, grant management systems, and the like. Some of the key findings at the top level, and we'll delve into the detail here in a second. Survey respondents, they're most likely to say that their organization is, in fact, really focused on modernizing these solutions. Certainly on the front end, being able to extract more data out of these systems, performing analytics, using business intelligence tools. Most of our survey participants were focused on the financial management and budget management area. That said, we really ran the full gamut of folks focused on HR, procurement, and grants management as well. Reducing manual processes was the top goal. Many of these systems, as I mentioned, they were implemented 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I know for Oregon, we've been on a path to modernize our enterprise resource planning system modules. They were implemented one at a time. They were never implemented with integration in mind, with business and data analytics in mind, with transparency in mind. And so, our oldest system is still in place. It's our financial management system that was implemented in 1994 to 97. We just replaced with a cloud solution, the HR related systems and payroll. Those systems were about 40 years old, implemented in the late 1980s. So, many state governments and local governments alike are faced with, this legacy system challenge. And, we're all kind of at different points along the way in modernizing them. Integration certainly was a key theme that interviewees and survey respondents called out as a main challenge with their current business systems, and we'll delve into that as we move through the survey. I did want to, again, kind of highlight the focus areas of our survey respondents, and certainly give you a chance here in a second, Avi, to share your thoughts about how people responded to the survey. As I mentioned, we've got 4 or 5 top-level areas that folks are focused on. I mentioned business intelligence, finance and budget, customer relationship management. That it really is a new phenomenon for governments. Thinking of us in a glacial context, in our history, these customer relationship management solutions are only about 10 to 15 years old. But that said, we're in a position where folks are focused on that now. They have some legacy systems in place and want to replace them. But Avi, do you have any thoughts about the key focus areas of your clients that you and your Euna Systems team have been working with? What are they focused on replacing?
Sure. Well, let me say first, Sean, when I look at this data, right, and in context of that question, what's interesting to me is, right, you said there are 2 themes: the modernization and integration. And looking at those in kind, if you're asking what are the things to modernize, what was surprising was that business information, financial management, as we mentioned, the back office things folks may not find as exciting, were at the top of the list, whereas like CRM is number 4, right? Lower on the list, which if you asked me probably 5 years ago, that would not have been the case, right? CRM would be at the top of the list, right? Everybody wanted to figure out the citizen-facing, citizen engagement stuff, right? And again, to now answer your question, Sean, that is what we're seeing from clients, right? Is that, again, they need to solve these core business problems, right? Which require integration. So modernization begets, right, integration, right? And so I think we're seeing that shift, right, back kind of to the core of operations. And I'll add, the other thing that I think is interesting to see up here is human resources systems, right? Which you probably wouldn't have seen as high 5 or 6 years ago. Again, it's not the highest, but it's still higher. But I think that underscores, Sean, the point you were making, right? In Oregon, you're seeing it firsthand. There are these real profound hiring challenges. And in a real way, the human resources system gets in the way of getting that job done, right? And I would just say, kind of, if I were to put a button on the theme, right, it's like the theme now more days is like getting the job done, right? And if we are realizing that these systems are critical to doing that, right? So if in the absence of a large HR department, because we don't have staff, we need better tools to do it, right? In the absence of a whole team of financial analysts, we need better tools that can do that. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And we'll talk about, I think, in a minute, where I think cost savings is another emerging thing that we're seeing people talk about and think about more.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I'd kind of point out on this slide, and then I'll move into our next segment, but is that, there is the category here, enterprise resource planning system. We're going to talk about this toward the end of our discussion. This kind of false choice between individual modules, purpose-built solutions for each kind of administrative domain area, and a comprehensive integrated kind of single solution. And that's what we mean when we're talking about enterprise resource planning systems. So I know we got a question from one of our audience members about that, about the difference between the two. So there is a bit of redundancy in the survey, but that said, we all, you say tomato, I say tomato. We all use different terms. So we wanted to capture the primary responses from our survey respondents. So let me move into our next section here. We're audience members. We're going to ask you a poll question. We'd like to get you engaged in the conversation. And then we'll share some results from the survey on the same question. So if you all could, interact with us here, let us know in your own organizations, what are the biggest challenges that you're experiencing with your existing set of tools in this area? We've got a list of the 5 primary responses. We'll do some apples to apples comparison here in a moment between your responses here live on the webinar and what we were able to capture in the survey. But in the meantime, Abhi, perhaps you and I can chat a little bit.
I'm curious for your answer, Sean. Actually, I never asked you this question directly while we were planning this. So what would your answer be to this?
So I think in terms of the biggest challenges for Oregon government, it really had to do with this issue of lack of integration and cost. Because frankly, at least in the traditional model, kind of your mindset 10 plus years ago, replacing a statewide HR system or a statewide financial management system could cost $30 to $50 million at the statewide level. And, I would say it's fair to say that people in government are risk averse. We've been taught to be risk averse over time. Part of it has to do with the fact that this is the public's money. This is not our money. This is not a private company's money. And so we're really concerned about, big investments. We also know that there, unfortunately, there hasn't been a huge kind of record of success. On time, on budget delivery of these kinds of systems, and it can be, really difficult to implement. So now that said, on the integration side, I would say there are a whole series of questions about the operation of government that our policy leaders, our program leaders, our executive leaders just simply couldn't answer about our staff, about what we're spending, about our contracts, et cetera. And then kind of the last piece, it's not necessarily on this particular slide, but we have a graying of our workforce. The people who implemented our core administrative systems are ready for retirement or have already retired. And so our ability to maintain and support and secure our legacy systems is really challenged. So that's my response.
Well, it's interesting though. I mean, also is if you can step back and generalize what you're talking about, it's like really risk is the challenge, right? Like, in fact, we thought like these older systems, when we had this one big procurement that solved everything, we thought that was the less risky thing to do. But in fact, that is a risky thing to do. Like, now we're seeing the problems of that, right? With the graying workforce, with the aging, decaying infrastructure. And we don't know right now if we're going to write a check for $50 million, right? Not knowing the outcome, because to your point, all the headlines for large projects like that are pretty bad. I remember my old friend Vivek Gundra made a point that, like, of large federal IT projects, see, I'm saying federal, not state or local, Sean, so not on you or me. It was something like 90% of them are way over budget, and like 55 to 60% of them fail altogether. So yeah, there was a risk aversion, that, which again makes sense. So it's fine. In this way, risk aversion is a good thing, is what I'm getting at. And the less risky thing to do, in my opinion, and I'm biased, right, is look at like a modular approach, right? Like, let's go do one big piece of it, right? Not the whole thing, but one meaty piece, and then do the next while thinking about how they connect together. But I would just, if you're asking me my answer to that question, what I hear the most often, at least, really is the lack of, it's kind of captured here, but integration to the next level up, which is lack of visibility for executive leaders into what's happening, right? Which then, to your point, like, makes it difficult for administrative leaders, right, to then explain to the executive, to the policy or legislative leaders to understand this is what's going on, right? They're going to ask questions. I remember this when I was chief data officer in LA, Sean. Like, they'd ask questions like, "What's going on with this and this?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, and they're like, "You're the chief data officer, Abhi. You should have that information." I'm like, that's just not how it's built, guys. So,
That's right.
I think it was a problem for me then, but I'm curious what our group thinks.
Sure. Well, let's get right to it. So here's our poll results. And so our audience, their predominant answer is lack of automation. So likely, I would say, what we're dealing with here is a legacy system that was implemented long ago, that doesn't meet all of our business needs today. And so we have a whole bunch of manual workarounds, manual processes that we have put in place to compensate for the lack of functionality, really, that's in our solution. But what's your take on these responses?
That tracks, and it's interesting. The lack of automation, I think, is both a reflection of people seeing, like, we all see now that we can automate a lot of things in other systems, right? And it feels like it should be possible in these very large, expensive systems, but it's not. I also think it's a reflection, and maybe I'm a one-trick pony here, but I think it's reflective also of staffing challenges, right? That, like, we don't have enough people now, so we need to be able to automate things, right, to get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's we've heard what our audience thinks about this particular question. Let's move to our survey responses. So again, lack of integration, lack of automation, and certainly implementation challenges. Costs is in the top 5 here with those folks that were interviewed. The key leaders that we talked to. Any remaining thoughts before we move on to our next poll question?
I just would flag the term collaboration, I think, is interesting here. And I'm actually really curious for the audience's thoughts and how they would define collaboration. I know in my own conversations, there's a couple different ways to look at it. But in this context, I think what I'm hearing, what this means to me is a lack of an ability to collaborate with other stakeholders within your department with the tools at hand, or without people outside your department, right? Which, again, is increasingly essential in kind of networked structures, bureaucracy that are trying to move forward in cross-functional ways. We need to have cross-functionally compliant tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Well, let's move forward to our next question for our audience. We'd very much like to better understand, what your organization's goals are with modern business software. And again, please select all that apply. We've got cost savings, reducing manual processes, enhancing reporting capabilities, improved data sharing and integration, and then finally, in no particular order, improving customer service. I know a lot of these systems certainly benefit most directly the employees of an organization, but also certainly from a transparency perspective, from a responsiveness to questions that are posed, et cetera. Customer service is really important. And of course, we've got our internal and external customers within our own enterprises. A lot of times you'll have a corporate office at the state government level or at a county or city level that serves multiple bureaus or agencies within their particular jurisdiction. And they've got to get it right and have a functional system that meets the needs. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a particular bureau or domain area within your organization going rogue and trying to implement their own solutions, right? Shadow administrative information systems popping up all over the place. So, what are your thoughts, Abi, on this particular topic? What kinds of primary goals do your customers typically have when you engage them?
Well, first, I'm mostly just trying to figure out how we sorted this list, because it's not alphabetical, it's not reverse alphabetical, and I'm trying to figure it out, but that's not, I think, the goal here. It's just me being a super nerd. I mean, what I hear the most often is reducing manual processes. And in the context of like, and really in the best possible way, which is we have staff that wants to do really important work, right? And they don't have time to because they're too busy doing things with old systems that are paper-based. So for instance, I didn't talk about one software we have called SpedTrack. It's for special education. And it's designed to help special education teachers and administrators track and report on outcomes so they could get federal grant funding, Medicaid funding, et cetera, right? Well, that's wonderful, right? That they're getting those resources, but we don't want them spending their time doing that, right? But they're right now doing a manual process, and that's what our tool does, is it automates it. And I think when I hear that, that's what comes to mind is we should let teachers teach, right? And not fill out spreadsheets.
That's right, absolutely. Well, let's move to our poll results here. Let me see here. There we go. So our audience, they had several options, and you hit it right on the head. Reducing manual processes was number one.
Sean, I just realized they're voting while we're talking. So this is what we would call a push poll, right?
That's right. That's right. They wanted to validate your opinion.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And then, second among their responses, improving data sharing and integration. We talked about that previously in terms of the primary challenges. So, of course, you'd want to focus on that. Any other thoughts that you might have that jump out at you looking at these responses from our audience members?
I would just echo what you were talking about, Sean, when you introduced them, which is the improved customer service. Again, it's lower than I would have expected 3 or 4 years ago. It was probably higher than this. But again, I just think the changing realities and expectations, but it's still up there, right? And so customer service is still essential. I think I just saw another state hire a chief customer experience officer, right? So you're seeing this thing more and more happen. So even if it's less of a priority than it was, it's not going away. And I think you said it really well, Sean, which is we have customers internally and externally, right? And when I talk to like CIOs, they're thinking about that, right? Which is how are they servicing their customers in the procurement office, right? And then also how are they servicing the businesses and the other contractors that they work with?
Yeah, for sure. Certainly, we don't often think of our colleagues in other agencies as customers, but when you're primarily responsible for these corporate business solutions, these administrative information systems that are supposed to serve everybody, you've got to change your mindset for sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move to the counterpoint here. I think there'll be some alignment here in our survey responses, but let's move to that. Again, predominant response that we got in the survey was reducing manual processes in terms of primary goals. As you mentioned, improving customer service, and then our audience and you, Abi, can take a look at some of our other responses. I'm curious if anything pops out. Certainly one of the things that we didn't pose as a potential response to our audience members here has to do with security. Of course, that's top of mind for most CIOs, regardless of jurisdiction. And certainly these legacy systems, they weren't designed for the internet. They weren't designed to be connected to a wide world out there that is also inhabited by the bad guys, so to speak.
And Skynet, right? Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this issue of increased security and whether that's a key driver for modernization efforts among your customers?
It comes up all the time, but I would say less often than I would have expected. And I have two kind of explanations or hypotheses around that. One is, again, I think based on the survey, we weren't just talking to CIOs, right? The survey wasn't just appealing to CIOs. It was broader than that. It was business leaders, right? Or business unit leaders. And I think, yeah, amongst like the friends I go hang out with all the time, they're CIOs. We all talk about cybersecurity all the time, right? Then we go watch movies about AI. But like, that's not, I think, something that comes up as often for other departments. I also think, at least the way I think about it is like now cybersecurity is like table stakes, right? Like you have to have that set and firm, right? And you've got to validate that and show it's real, right? But that's table stakes. So then once you've got that set, then the other question is, all right, what else can you do for me, right? And that's why I would suspect why it's not as high on the list.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I know for Oregon, as these administrative systems in the, the HR, the procurement, in the HR space, we've got, of course, associated modules of payroll, learning management. As those solutions come online, certainly Oregon state government has focused on ensuring multi-factor authentication for all users, moving to single sign-on, certainly for state agency personnel that are accessing these solutions. Little more difficult for single sign-on when you have folks from external jurisdictions, as an example, accessing the state procurement system. But that said, it's a focus and it's a going in kind of baseline requirement as you.
Exactly. Yeah,
for sure. Well, let's move to our next survey question. We posed as part of this survey to our survey respondents and interviewees the following question. Are your organization's business systems integrated to share data and communicate with each other in real time? Of course, most of us have legacy systems deployed, but I'm actually surprised by this particular response. Some of them are certainly farther along the path than our state government was. What do you think about this particular question and how our survey respondents provided their feedback?
Yeah. Well, given how almost neatly of a bell curve it is, I thought it was made up when I first saw it. I'm kidding. But to your point, it is actually more positive than what would expected, right? Particularly when framed in this way, right? Integrated and shared data in real time, right? This isn't just saying lightweight integration, right? Where they all look the same, right? They all have the same fonts, right? We're talking about actual data flowing in and out of systems. So I think that's good, but I also think it kind of reflects. I think it's surprising, but it also is reassuring because it reflects the fact that these things need to be integrated, right? And to your point, right, these were probably legacy systems for most of these respondents that they're referring to. And when they're doing the integration, it wasn't when they bought them that they were integrated. Me and my friends in LA used to make this joke. We'd have to drill a hole every time we wanted to integrate things, right? So we have to like write little, our CISO was not a fan of mine, but so we would have to drill a little hole to connect the dots between things. And I think that's what's happening, right? I mean, again, I'd love to hear from folks in the audience if they disagree, but my guess is that's what's happening more so, which again, is reflective of reality, but also for me, at least, thinking about Euna moving forward and my role as product strategy, it means that we really have to think about how we're servicing and sharing data across different departments, particularly for kind of senior executives and folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one more thing I'd mention before we move to the next slide is that, I did mention in my background that for the last 10 plus years, I've been involved in Oregon's open data and transparency efforts as well. I serve as the committee administrator for our Transparency Commission. And one of the key inhibitors to transparency is that you have back office systems like the ones we're talking about that aren't integrated and don't allow for real-time query of those systems externally, right? And so we end up with a whole bunch of spreadsheets or CSV files that are posted on our transparency websites about compensation and procurement and expenditures and the like. And they're not particularly useful because when people see them, they have questions, right?
So my friend, I think there's a separate webinar you and I should do on this, the challenges of transparency and open data with legacy systems. Because there is, my friend, massive challenges.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's keep moving things forward. So, we asked our survey respondents, what are the top 3 most important factors when evaluating a new business system for adoption? And, on the left side of the slide, we give kind of the key takeaway. While ease of use and accessibility are the most important factors for city and state respondents, county respondents say that security and the ability to integrate with existing software is most important when evaluating a new business system for adoption. What are your thoughts, Avi?
Well, I think now, see, it's funny. We see security now on the top, right?
Yeah.
Which is what we're saying is surprising not to see it beforehand.
Yeah.
So, right, but again, go back to the question, right? The other one was our goals, and these
Yeah.
are considerations for evaluation, right?
Yeah.
So back
Yeah.
to table stakes, right? Yeah, we're going to evaluate for security because that is a table stakes, right? That is essential. But our goal is going to be to do other things, right? Like reduce manual processes. So I think that's what's interesting about this. And the other thing I would just flag is the ease of use and accessibility. I just want to emphasize that just to connect it to your point about customer service, that it's not just about ease of use for the citizen, right? Because in here, we're talking about business systems. So your users are your budget analysts, are your procurement analysts, right? And so we have to think about their ease of use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, certainly one item that wasn't here that I think you could probably fit in that top category on accessibility, certainly is, can I only access the solution when I'm sitting behind my desk at the office, or can I access it remotely? Can I access it from a mobile device? Those kinds of things. So a lot of these things are inherent in these overarching categories for sure. Okay, well let's keep things moving forward here. Here we have a question about cloud-based SaaS solutions versus on-premises systems. Of course, almost every one of our legacy systems that we've deployed in our environments, they were deployed on-premise, or they're as a managed service accessible in someone else's data center, but they're really not cloud solutions. They're not configurable software as a service solutions, et cetera. So, here we have, our respondents indicating that the advantages that they see is that mobility can be accessed remotely, data backup and recovery. We know that as part of our RFPs or part of the proposals that cloud providers give us, they're featuring this issue of backup recovery, business continuity that we can be assured of, scalability of solutions. So if we get massive surge of access, that they take care of all of that on the back end to scale our solutions as we're moving from pilot to full production in a 40,000 person environment, right? So anyway, those were some of our respondents from the survey, but be curious to your thoughts on what we heard in the survey and or what you hear from your other customers that you work with.
Sure. Well, I think it's interesting to look at those top three, because the first one I think is in many ways, and an easy description of that is just a response to the pandemic, right? When everyone started to work remotely, and I think that's true. But I would actually think about this more, or at least think about it in a human sense when I think about friends in CIO roles and thinking about why they prefer this. It just makes life easier, right? Like if you can access it from any computer, even for them, right? And for other department heads, they don't have to like worry about it, right? It's just easy, right? And like they don't have to do trainings on getting things. So I think that's a big piece of it, which again underscores on the second two answers, which I would generalize as like kind of resilience, right? Like, we've got a lot of stuff that may happen, so we need to make sure that your data is backed up and secure, right? And there may be times that things go wild and you need a lot of stuff to happen, back to resilience, so you need to be able to scale, right? Like you may not get a lot of people going to the Department of Public Works website if you live in Southern California until it snows a lot, which it doesn't usually, but sometimes it does. And then everybody wants to know where the snow plows are, right? That's a back office system, my friend, right? That's an asset management system that you're using, rely on that. So I think that's where people are like, oh, we have to think about these things at scale because we don't know what's going to come up and they have to be ready to go.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would throw out here that has been, a key risk area, but also behind the scenes, I would tell you as a person that has been promoting the accelerated use of cloud-based solutions in government, it actually is a key driver to process change. It's not listed here as an option, but I would tell you, the only way to successfully, or one of the only ways to successfully implement a cloud-based software as a service solution is to focus on what can be configured in the system.
Yeah.
But if something needs to be customized, this is not the type of solution you want to acquire, right? And
Yeah.
so, you almost have this freeze. You have this this going in philosophy or key principle that there will be zero customization of the solution. And what that means is that all of our legacy processes that we've been using, whether they're limited automated processes within a legacy system or the manual processes we've been limping along with for 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
We're going to have to change how we do business in order to successfully implement the solution. And sometimes that's the only way a sponsor can actually drive that change, right? Hey, I can't do anything about it. I'd love to accommodate your customization requests, but we can't. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Using the new cloud platform as a way to drive an agenda for broader reform. And I think earlier when we saw the comments about implementation being a challenge, I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Implementation isn't just about making sure the server's up and running, because that's already done, right? Implementation in modern context is change management, right? And I'm proud to say, like, one thing we pride ourselves at Euna on is working hand in hand with governments to not just implement the new software, but drive forward the change agenda they're trying to do. Because again, these systems kind of reflect the processes that we have. And so it's important to do them at the same time.
That's right. That's right. Well, the clock is ticking here on the available time we have. So I'm going to keep moving forward and move to our next poll question. We've obviously got some of our survey responses as well that we'll show here in a second, but we want to hear from our audience about your concerns, the risks that you see in your organization or that you've talked about when you're considering the use of cloud-based software as a service solutions. We've provided 5 responses here. Is it centered on higher costs, security or compliance concerns, difficulty integrating with legacy systems that you're not yet ready to replace, internet connectivity concerns? Now we've got everything in the cloud. What if we have an outage? And then, certainly from a maintenance, operations, and support perspective, are you concerned that you have less control over these systems if you, again, pursue a cloud-based solution? So while our audience is recording their responses, I'm curious as to your thoughts with the customers you work with across the country.
I think the thing I hear the most often is C. It's the difficulty integrating with legacy systems. And what I often hear, and I'll put this in their almost caricaturized form, but is we can't just spin up another thing that's not going to go anywhere, right? So we can't just spin up a new, job application system that's not integrated to your human capital management system that's not connected to ERP, which is fair, right? These are, as we mentioned at the very top of this call, these are vitally important systems for government using taxpayer dollars for critical service delivery, right? So it could be challenging and a risk of saying, let's go do something new if you don't have the entire thing mapped out, right? So that, I think, is a risk, but that also thinks that's an advantage of a modular approach, right? If you're thinking about things that are kind of plug and play, that are like internet savvy, which is to say the data can flow in and out, or internet native, then you can get ahead of that problem. But that to me it's a risk. It's a reasonable one, but I also think it's an addressable one.
Yeah, I agree with you. One additional item that I'd mentioned before I move to our poll results on the cost issue. Really, I'll take it a little different turn. It's more about one of the things that we talk about is how are we going to fund this solution? Because if we had a traditional system that we're going to have on premise that is this expensive, we might consider bonding that particular investment. It's nuanced when you consider software as a service, pay by the user type of systems. In terms of the fact that you're moving from CapEx to OpEx expenditures, and so it's just a consideration. You've got to be thinking about how you're going to fund a solution, both during the implementation phase, the project phase, but also operations and maintenance over time. So that's another consideration people need to think about. Let's move to our poll results here. So our audience indicates that you hit it right on the head, Avi. Difficulty integrating with legacy systems. When you have this mixed environment, this hybrid environment with your administrative systems, and you are moving from your employees, as an example, being the ones to maintain and support the legacy system portfolio, and now you have new players in the mix, contractors in the mix. It can be concerning. So, any surprises here?
No, I think that this totally tracks.
Okay, great. Well, let's move to the survey respondents. Let's see here. So their concerns, of course, they highlighted security and compliance, internet connectivity, difficulty integrating with legacy systems. So certainly, I think roughly a third, and a third, of folks felt this was important, and I think it tracks with our audience.
Yeah. Also, remember here they could select all and not just one. But I think
you're right.
The internet connectivity and the security. Connectivity, I think, is an important concern that we're not going to have time to get into today. But equity issues are real when we think about web-based native systems. So we have to be mindful of that, and I think that's why governments are rightly asking that question.
Yeah, and on the security and compliance piece, this is actually a surprising response that folks would have more concern about this. But I think this is a nuanced response here. Certainly you've got to think about where your data is being stored, the protections that are around it. I now don't have full control of that, but at the same time, I do think, at least it's been my experience, that contractually or via other audit mechanisms, you actually have a better chance of ensuring that a cloud-based software as a service solution adheres to security requirements and controls than you often do in your internal environment.
And I would just add, Sean, is that that's where I think purpose-built software as a service is really critical, right? So service software built for government and the public sector from the start has public sector compliance and security concerns baked in, right? Yeah. And I think that's where, if you just go to a generic off-the-shelf procurement tool, it may not have the exact requirements that we need, particularly when it comes to things like compliance. But when you're working with a purpose-built solution, for instance, like Euna's, you have that kind of peace of mind going in. But to your point, it's a nuanced thing, and understandably something that people have questions and concerns about.
Yeah, totally. Well, we've got about 8 minutes left, so I'm gonna keep moving forward. I'm gonna move into we're done with our survey. Really want to thank our audience for recording your responses to our poll questions. I'm going to move into a Q&A. We've got a couple of questions from our audience members. Part of this really centers on the fact that, both our audience today and I'm sure every client that you all work with at Euna Solutions is at a different place in their evolution as an organization. And, I'd like to ask, based on your experience, what advice would you have for state and local government organizations who haven't yet taken the plunge, haven't yet decided they're going to modernize these business systems that help them run their business? And also talk a little bit about your thoughts about that kind of false choice, and either I purchase and implement a single integrated solution, or versus going with this purpose-built, one step at a time, one bite of the apple type of approach to modernize these solutions. So I'd be interested in your thoughts for a couple of minutes, and then I'll have a couple of closing questions for you.
Great. Well, I think so. It's interesting. Before I started this role, actually, when I was consulting, I actually worked a lot with new mayors. When they get elected, they would reach out and be like, so, Avi, I know you've worked on tech for government, for cities. What should we do, right? What will we get started to do, right? And of course, there'd be these broad, big ambitions of predictive modeling of water flows, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, yes, that's all great. But Sean, my biggest piece of advice when I sit down with them, I'm like, let's pick one clear, discernible thing, right, that solves a problem that the mayor, he or she has, right? And let's go after that, right? I would tell the mayor, articulate that really clearly, right? And then let's go after that individual problem, right? Because as you and I both know, in government, there are more problems than we could count, right? More wicked problems than we care to admit. So going after fixing everything all at once is a Sisyphean challenge, my friend. It is a fool's errand, right? And so, and I try to explain that without crushing new mayors' hopes and dreams. So it's a tough dance, Sean. But when we get there, right? So if you get clear on that, then the next question turns to, all right, how are you going to go about doing that, right? And my advice with that typically is twofold, right? Find strong leaders within the organization that you can empower to drive that agenda forward, right? One thing I've always liked to do is find kind of the change agents within an organization, even if their title isn't CFO or CTO, CIO, right? But someone who has a point of view and a plan. And then finally, the biggest advice I would give, and the thing I see that makes the successful clients, the really, really successful government stand out, is they think about the storytelling, right, with the deployment, with the new solution, right? Which again, coming full circle, Sean, is hard to do in our case, right? Because we're talking about back office systems like budgeting, right? Like budgeting isn't the most exciting thing to write home about, right? I used to write long form medium essays about helping social safety net. It's harder to do that for budget, but not impossible, right? Particularly when you think that like, oh, budget decisions affect, can we help our homeless population? Procurement decisions affect, are we supporting women and minority-owned businesses, right? Grant decisions affect, are we driving forward equitable redevelopment, right? So our challenge, right, as leaders of technology in general, but then in particular technology in these back office business systems, is to find a way to tell compelling stories about what happens when you modernize, right? When you do it right. And I think that's both hard, but fortunately, thanks to things like SaaS and this larger community that folks like the Center for Digital Government are pulling together, there's a broader community of folks who can help share best practices. So you don't have to start from zero, right? You can start from 50 and see how far you can go. And I think that's the biggest thing I'd recommend people to do, is just think about how you can always be communicating the value add in very human terms, because that's how you're going to get the buy-in you need to push these things forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Those are some great insights. Well, I'm gonna give you about 2 minutes and I'm gonna couple two questions together as we close our webinar today. You know, we talked a bit about the HR challenge that we have, our workforce challenge that we have. We need to mention skill sets and experience and training here. So, in your view, what kinds of skill sets, experience, and training is required for state and local governments to make this kind of transition? Can they, in your view, in your experience working with folks, make it on their own? What kind of help do they need from companies like Euna Solutions? I need you to couple that with any key takeaways that you might have for our audience before we close today. And you've got 2 minutes. That's all I'm going to give you.
Sure. Well, I'll make it very quick, which I think what governments need to look for and think about are partnerships, right? Like deep, profound partnerships with these technology vendors, because not only do we have, because solving the staffing challenges, even if we do hire a bunch of people tomorrow, Sean, that's not going to solve this quarter's budget issues, right? So we have to get the job done now, right? And I think that's where governments have to turn to thoughtful, experienced private sector partners who've done this with dozens, hundreds, thousands of governments, and can say, all right, we can help you accomplish your goals from now, right? So of course we have to have the technology, right? The basic technology, but what I think the kind of key value add, the key need now, particularly in light of the staffing challenges, is the expertise and the know-how to help get the job done more quickly. And I think that's what we're really excited here at Euna Solutions to do, is to work with cities and states and counties that are trying to do the job, do new things with the job, but they just don't have the staffing or resourcing to do it. We can bring the tools and they can benefit, right, from a larger community.
Yeah, well, very well said. Partnerships, you get by with a little help from your friends. Sometimes they're internal. Sometimes they're relationships that you need to build and ultimately exploit for good within your organization. But certainly, we do need to change our mindset in the procurement area when we think about these kinds of solutions, from one of an arm's length kind of relationship that we've traditionally had with private sector companies, and now we need to begin to build strategic partnerships for the long haul, because certainly these kinds of systems they live with us for decades.
That's
and
right.
so we've got to make sure we get it right up front, but also that we have good partners moving forward. Well, with the limited time we have, unfortunately, I'm going to have to close today's webinar. It's been a great discussion. Abhi, I really appreciate your insights. I want to thank you for everything you shared with our audience today and for our conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'd also like to thank Euna Solutions for making it possible to have this webinar discussion today. And I'd like to thank all of you, our audience members, for spending time with us. We want to point out, if you'd like to access a certificate of attendance, you have that option. Please click on the certificate widget in the console menu. We certainly look forward to seeing you again soon at an upcoming government technology event that fits your schedule. And we wish you all a great rest of your day. Abhi, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you,
the
Sean.
You bet.
And thank you all.